Well, the participation of women in investment and property ownership is steadily increasing. More than 65% of home loan applications on mortgagemarket.co.za are female buyers, highlighting the increasing dominance of women in the company's recent property sales transactions. This has been an observed trend over the past 6 months, according to Tim Akinnusi, the co-founder and CEO of mortgagemarket.co.za. For more on this, he joins us on the line. A very warm welcome to you, Tim. Thank you so very much for giving us your time here on SABC News, sir.
Thanks for having me on, Flo.
Just as a start, I think it's very interesting. The story that we just had before talking to you, it was talking about the fact that women make up 70% of unemployed people in South Africa, and those that do work, obviously, as we know, as has been the story throughout, earn less than men. But you're saying that women are now overtaking in terms of property investment. I mean, how is that possible, and how is that working?
Well, Flo, what we've seen is that this resurgence in the interest in property has been led by first-time home buyers, obviously, and a good 65% of those have actually been female. So we're seeing this trend all the way through from property inquiries, the home loan applications themselves, and actual home loan sales. And why we think this is the case is that we suspect that the positive sentiment around property and women being natural homemakers, coupled with the lockdown, has meant that a lot more people are spending time at home. And so the thesis is that we're seeing single mothers and women of color make more of a significant proportion of the home loan applicants as a result of this. In fact, if we look specifically at the types of properties that are being purchased, they're often multi-bedroom properties over R1 million. So we are seeing that these women are either single women who are looking after kids, or at least have dependents that they need to care for. So that's just a trend that we are observing in our stats, and it's a really positive trend, and we were very, very, very happy to see that, especially during Women's Month.
And Tim, how are things, if you look at them, if we were to compare to the rent-to-buy market? What does it look like there?
Yeah, well, we're seeing that because interest rates are so low, a lot of individuals out there, especially women, are simply taking the opportunity to just convert from renting those places into buying them, given that the cost of paying the monthly installment is pretty much the same as what they'll be paying on the rentals. So that is the trend that we're seeing. And of course, we're seeing more and more women make up a greater proportion of this number of individuals that are switching from the rental pool into the buying pool as well, Flo.
Now, I'd like to zoom in on joint bond applications. There is this perception that, people aren't really getting married as much as they used to, and are perhaps, staying single. You mentioned single mothers, for example, buying properties alone for their dependents and so forth. Is that what the stats are indeed actually showing, that people aren't actually getting married as much as we remember in the past?
Yeah, well, the joint application scenario has obviously been about being able to club together and afford a much bigger property, and hence, the marriage factor, or at least a partnership, is sort of the way in which those two things happen. What we're seeing is that really in the past have women being the main applicants in this scenario of joint, but we are seeing more and more women actually become the main applicants. And that's typically because they have better credit records than the male counterparts. And in many instances, we've actually observed women actually lose out on being able to acquire property because their credit records have been good and their male counterparts' credit record hasn't been so great. And because of the factor of buying in community of property, banks need to take a holistic picture on both applicants, which is actually a bit of a negative drawback for women in this space. So we're potentially seeing that women are then choosing to buy either in their own names or in a company name. But certainly the trend of single women and single mothers in particular is certainly leading that category, where joint bonds just aren't able to work. Okay?
And are banks changing their attitude slowly, when it comes to black female buyers? There's been a very negative perception, one I've also spoken about quite a lot on social media, where it does seem that banks tend to be a little bit harder and see you more of a risk if, you are a black female. Is there a change? Is there going to be a change? What's your assessment on that? I'm sure you've heard quite a bit on that.
Yeah, Flo, we've observed that sort of myth in the marketplace, and I'd like to call it a myth because there isn't any proven stats that suggest that banks are profiling candidates based on race, gender, or religion. We're really seeing that banks are looking at the absolute hard numbers in terms of candidates' use of credit, the areas that they're buying, and the type of properties that they're buying. So we suspect that as more women improve their credit portfolios or their credit records, that banks will be able to lend a lot more to them naturally. But I don't want to sort of make the point that there is a race bias or a gender bias in the calculation around who to lend to. I just think that is perhaps maybe not a very accurate assessment of how the banks choose to lend.
Well, will this trend be sustainable, where we are seeing, women buying more properties? I mean, I'm talking about the fact that we're in a situation now where, the rate of retrenchments are so high, people losing jobs during this pandemic. I mean, what do you foresee, going forward?
It's a good question, Flo. We've observed a lovely uptick in the number of applications and in the boom of individuals looking for property. But the trend that we need to be more careful about is the jobs numbers. And we need to look at the fact that in the coming months, we are going to see more of a squeeze around the employment rate. And if that continues to be under pressure, then the affordability is going to be compromised, and banks will never recklessly lend to individuals that they don't see can afford these properties in the long term. So we suspect maybe this so-called W effect. So we've seen an increase, a slump back to an increase, and we could potentially see a slump in the coming last quarter of the year. So let's just be hopeful that that doesn't happen. But certainly the fact that incomes are under pressure means that that is a likely scenario.
All right. Tim, a pleasure as always. Thank you very much for giving us your time.
Thank you very much for having me.